Dear scholars, in the last lecture we discussed about theory of tragedy by Aristotle. Theory of tragedy is usually divided into two parts. It's a pretty lengthy concept. So let's see, we'll continue with that. Let's see what Aristotle has to say about tragedy. There's one term, dianoia. Dianoia means the willful sharing with the audience. It was an important part of the dramatic process. In societies sans individualism, the character was bound to explain his conduct to his friends, the city, family, and the gods. We know that we are living in an age of individualism, wherein the individual is the focus and everything else becomes secondary, so much so that even state sometimes becomes secondary. But that wasn't the case with Greek civilization. If we look at Greek civilization, so an individual was responsible. He was responsible to the family, he was responsible to the city, and he was responsible to the gods and the state as well. And this concept of state has also been borrowed by the Britishers. And when we read plays such as Richard II by Shakespeare, we find that state assumes so much importance that the Duke of York doesn't even spare his son when he goes to the king to complain against his own child that he was plotting against the state. So responsibility in these classical civilizations to society and the city assumed a great deal of importance. It wasn't like the present day modern scenario. Now, capacity to make moral choices decided the greatness of the protagonist. Protagonist was stuck and he had to take a decision. He was confined, he was trapped, he was at crossroads, which way he needs to take. So according to Greek standards, a perplexed character like Hamlet would fall into the category of anti-hero. You know that a character like Hamlet would fall into the category of an anti-hero because Hamlet was confined, he couldn't make a choice, he couldn't take a decision. So according to Greek standards, he would fall in the category of an anti-hero. We know he fails to decide, and based upon his indecisiveness, Coleridge has gone to the extent of terming Hamlet as a tragedy of reflection. Then we have hamartia and ethos. These are another important elements of a tragedy. So let's see what is hamartia and ethos. Many of Greek tragedies have little room even for hamartia. Hamartia is the error of judgment. Error of judgment on the part of hero, what action he needs to take. Like Hamlet is the best example again to understand this. We know when king was at prey, Hamlet could have taken the revenge. He could have killed him. But then Hamlet is occupied with the thoughts of the other world. He feels that the king is laid down with the thoughts of God. He would go to the heaven, and if he kills him, he himself would go to hell. As a result, he misses the opportunity. And then finally what we have in the end is not only that the king is killed, but we even find that Hamlet himself has to pay for his life. So, but in Greek tragedies, it has they have little room for hamartia, error of judgment. For example, Oedipus. When we talk about Oedipus, Oedipus did not have any choice. It's only after the deed is over he gets to know. Before that, he didn't know anything. So that's how we look at things, that hamartia becomes questionable, where the hero doesn't get a choice at all. Now, doom, decay, fall and disaster is predestined, as in the case of Hippolytus, Orestia, Antigone or Electra. Hamartia therefore becomes questionable. Absence of free will, there's another important element, that's the absence of free will. Let's try to understand it in the Aristotelian context. Importance of hamartia in Christian and modern moralistic tragedies. We find that Christian tragedies and modern moralistic tragedies they've laid great emphasis on the absence of on free will. When we talk about Milton's Paradise Lost, when we talk about Bible, we find that man was given free will. The choices were there. One could exercise the choice, and Adam and Eve were forbidden to taste the fruit of the tree of knowledge, yet they defy, and we know then consequently what happens. Now there's another important thing in this, since we've taken up Paradise Lost example. It's Eve who claims whatever is denied to her. That's a very, very important argument, we as modern readers from the feminist point of view need to have. But coming back to the issue of free will, we notice that there was no such free will being given to the protagonist in Greek tragedies. Greek world therefore has no place for free will. Even right choices by the hero could not avert a catastrophe. Interplay of forces beyond the control of the hero. We have the interplay of forces which are beyond the control of the hero. Hero cannot control anything. There are forces beyond his control. Suffering usually comes from outside rather than from inside. Then there are two terms which Aristotle talks about, that's Moira and hubris. Moira is the family share misfortune planned or allotted by the gods. We know we lay stress on moral activities. We talk about good things. We try to act in a nice way, and that's to avert misfortunes. So it is interrelated. It's not that just the character himself is responsible for everything, but even it's a larger canvas wherein the family is also involved in the misfortune. Then hubris is the transgression, daring step by the hero to escape the tragic situation. Now hubris is when the hero takes a daring step and tries to avoid. Now these two terms may be found to have been intertwined. If you look at things, these two things are mentioned together. Now dianoia and lexis in detail. Defining dianoia, Aristotle says, third in order is the faculty of saying what is possible and pertinent in given circumstances. In case of oratory, this is the function of political art and art of rhetoric, and so indeed the older poets make their characters speak the language of civic life, the poets of our time the language of rhetoricians. Character is that which reveals moral purpose, showing what kind of things the man chooses or avoids. Speeches therefore which do not make this manifest, or in which the speaker does not choose or avoid something, are expressive of ethos or character. Thought, on the other hand, is found where something is proved to be or not to be, or a general maxim is enunciated. This from Poetics. This is what Aristotle talks about dianoia lexis. Now the connection between dianoia and the protagonist. Dianoia is the courage to make a choice. It's the courage to make a choice when the protagonist is given choices, so he needs to exercise the option, and that depends the selection of option, the exercising of option rather, it decides the course of further action. While the thoughts leading to the point of choice, the thoughts, the arguments that are taking place in his mind, they are termed as dianoia. So that's how we look at dianoia. It's the struggle, it is of thoughts, it's the process leading to the point of choice, to the decision. In general terms, it is a moral and philosophical debate going on in the mind of the protagonist. Such a thought process is often the part of a dialogical process when a character is seen brooding over his predicament, like we have in the case of Hamlet. wherein he says to be or not to be. That's the question. It is because of this reason that Aristotle terms it as an essential component of tragedy. The emphasis laid by Aristotle on this dialectical dianoia is doubtless connected with Aristotle's theory of tragedy part 1, the decisive influence exercised by political debate and forensic pleading in Greek theatre, the agent of ecclesia, that's assembly, or of the law courts being reproduced in the agon of the drama. That's Butcher's observation on this. Now the relation between lexis and melopoia. Lexis and melopoia are among the 6 essential elements of tragedy. However, these have been accorded little space in the poetics, creating thus an impression of the little space in poetics. However, the reality is different. It seems that Aristotle, while discussing other priority issues, could not dwell much on these. We know many parts of poetics, they are lost, and it seems to be an haphazard work. So preservation during those times of such any sort of literature was really difficult, and whatever we have is in fragments. So that's one problem. It seems that while discussing, he seems the priority issues, it seems that he could dwell much on the subject. Now, lexis is language. It can be noticed in theatre in 2 parts, namely the spoken word and the sung. We find that in theatre there are 2 modes of expression. One is the dialogue, when characters speak, and the other one is through singing, wherein the former reflects the natural conversation. When we talk about the spoken word, it talks about the conversation, while the latter was widely used in theatrical performances. We know that dances play an important part. When chorus enters, it's usually in a dancing fashion that it enters the stage. Then pitch variation, stress, intonation and voice modulation formed an important part of dialogue delivery. Even in the present day, we see politicians, the way they change their tone, the way they lay stress on words, the way they vary their pitch and they modulate their voice. It forms, it's really important to have an impact on the audience. So these devices were an integral part of the art of a dramatist, because without proper exercising of these specific elements, dialogue delivery was supposed to be meaningless or ineffective. So a gap between the spoken language and the song can always be noticed in European theatre, and European theatre is the best to understand the difference between spoken dialogue and the song. However, such a gap never existed in ancient times. That's probably the reason that ancient theorists did not accentuate much on the difference between the spoken word and the sung one. However, word and its musical element always mattered a lot to them. We know that word and its musical element, it had always appealed, and it has a great impact on theatrical performances. Then language, music and diction, how these are related, let's talk about it. Language and music were 2 major components of sound, and it would be appropriate here to look at what Aristotle has to say. Next is regards diction. One branch of the inquiry treats modes of utterance, but this province of knowledge belongs to the art of delivery and to the matters of that science. It includes, for instance, what is a command, a prayer, a statement, a threat, a question, an answer, and so forth. To know or not to know these things involves no serious censure upon the poetic art. We may therefore pass this over as an inquiry that belongs to another art, not to poetry. This is Aristotle's intake, but the central point of argument here is that we talk about modes of utterance. You see, if it is a command, we need to issue a command in a different way. If it is a prayer, it has to be followed in different words. And if there is a statement, so pitch, intonation, stress, and everything is different in a way a statement is delivered. When we are delivering a threat, then these elements are exercised in a different way. Similarly, there is the case with questions and answers. Now, functional aspects of language. Exclusions of modes of utterance from inquiry indicates that Aristotle was more concerned with grammar, phonology, and figures of speech. A dramatist should ideally know about a threat or a command. That's how, you look at the speech of the politicians, you look at the speech of the opposition, how they threat the ruling governments, how they threaten them. You look at the language, and you look at, as far as command is concerned, you look at the people in the armed forces. And when you notice the way they are talking, there's a gulf of difference between the speech delivered by an army commander and a politician from a ruling party and a politician from the opposition. So you find, you can easily notice the difference, and this is what Aristotle highlights. So Aristotle therefore was more concerned with the functional aspect of language pertaining to syllables and letters, etc. The linguistic styles. So we may go on to see what he has to say on a playwright's linguistic style. Aristotle focused on the balance between current usage words and the clarity and creation of loftiness through the use of extraordinary uses to avoid obscurity. Now, when we are conversing in a common man's language, especially in the modern world wherein the focus is on democracy, so democracy itself talks about common man. So, the artist, in order to reach to the masses or to the common man, has to use the language used by common man. If we get into jargons, if we coin new terminology which is not necessary, so that creates obscurity and people fail to understand. Then he says, the perfection of style is to be clear without being mean. That diction, on the other hand, is lofty and raised above the commonplace, which employs unusual words. By unusual, I mean strange or rare words, metaphorical, lengthened anything, in short, that differs from the normal idiom. Yet a style wholly composed of such words is either a riddle or a jargon. We talked about it. An unusual word it becomes a jargon. For by deviating in exceptional cases from the normal idiom, the language will gain distinction, while at the same time the partial conformity with usage will give perspicuity. So he focuses on the language which is being used, which is in common use. Then importance of music. We know music has a very important role in theatre, even in Elizabethan world and even in human life. When a scientist, while making trials in his laboratory, fails time and again, then it's music that comes to his rescue and soothes his spirit. And when we talk about the presence of music in the universe, it's no secret that heavenly bodies revolve at fixed velocities and they produce humming sound. Imagine if that humming sound changes. That's only possible when the planetary velocity would change, and if the velocity changes, there would be clashes everywhere. There are chances of destruction of many heavenly bodies. So that is why even Elizabethans laid great emphasis on music, especially in Shakespeare's plays. We find music being given a lot of importance. Now, chorus and the actors in Greek theatre were free to use musical forms that suited their purpose, as tunes, melodies and color forms could cover major areas of cultural reference. Now, these tunes, familiarity with musical tunes and melodies and colors, that could cover major areas of cultural reference. It may be noted that variation in tone and colors is not related to the universal laws as much as it is related to cultural associations. So different cultures have different color association, color sense and all. So that is how we look at it, that they reflect cultural associations. Giving an example of cultural memory used by the composer, Stanford says, if a dramatist wished to evoke poignant memories from the political past of Athens, he could introduce a tune from the popular drinking songs, that's Scholia, that went back to the time of tyranny of Pisistrates. According to Plutarch and Aristotle believed that Sappho invented the highly emotional musical scale called Mixolydian, and the tragedians took it from her and used it along the Dorian scale. So these were the tunes which he is talking about. Then Aristogenes is also the source of statement in the anonymous life of Sophocles, that Sophocles introduced the Phrygian scale into tragedy, and according to Celos, Sophocles also brought in the Lydian scale. That's what Stanford says. It may be therefore noted that great playwrights refined drama by not only writing new scripts of great literary importance, but when they were good composers of music and dance as well, which is evident from the saying, Frakinos invented as many dance steps as the waves of sea. So this is how we notice the importance of music, and playwrights were well versed with these musical elements. Describing the importance of music in tragedy, Nietzsche, the modern scholar, he observes that the extinction of the element of music from the modern tragedies has already made them dead. When we look at modern tragedies, they are without the element of music, and what we notice is that it is simply the death of a tragedy, because music plays an important role in emotive evolution. So Leo Island too harps on the subject when he says, if an Indian composer were to set a Sophocles chorus to the raga appropriate to the mood of the piece, making use of the exact rhythm score that Sophocles has left, and using only a unison tune, accompanied in unison by a rough reed instrument, then for his audience, he would have got very near indeed to the music of Sophocles. So music talks about association of different cultures, because it is an integral part of a human being's thought and feeling. Opsis and Chironomia. Opsis has been assigned the last place in Aristotelian scheme, as he related it only to the stage scenery. However, from a broader perspective, it should have included Chironomia, that's sign, gestures, movements, costumes, and the pattern of dances in choric performances. Please understand that all body movements, the movement of the body which communicates to the audience, it is termed as kinesics. It falls into the category of non-verbal communication. So gestures in dramatic performances were really important. Opsis therefore was an important element in Greek theatre. Aristotle's unelaboration or negligence of the subject cannot underrate its function, richness and beauty. Despite his unelaboration, the subject, his intent of the importance can be seen in his references to classical authors such as Athenaeus and Lucian in ancient Greece. Now, visual parts of a tragedy. Greek plays consist of a prologue, usually by a single actor. Sometimes there are two. Entry of chorus in a dancing and singing manner from the right side of the stage. The tragic chorus consisted of 5 files, suga, and 3 ranks, stoikoi, and the comic of 6 files and 4 ranks. Sometimes this entry called parados may have been in a single fine. Picard Cambridge has observed in dramatic festivals of Athens. You can correlate it with the Ramlila that you have in the Indian context. So there's a stage and actors, they enter, so chorus used to enter from the right side. So cultures have similarities. Now flute playing it formed an important part as far as musical element was concerned. We know that even flute playing is the same across all cultures, tune might vary. So flute player was an important character and chorus danced till parados was over. The leader was called as Koripkaios and was at the third number in the first file, being closest to the stage area. Then there was an episode wherein actors sang and spoke to each other. Reaction of chorus was usually in the form of a song. We've discussed earlier, chorus indulged in singing. After the performance was over, chorus sang a choral ode which consisted of a strophe, antistrophe and epode. Now role of chorus: dance, song, mime, dancing, playing and flute playing. The chorus presented a dramatic response in contribution of the dramatic action. It was responded by a dramatic response from chorus. It was an expression of hope, sorrow, despair or happiness, mainly manifested in song and dance. This was a cyclic pattern. At the termination, the final episode came Exodus, which usually consisted of an ode, few dialogues and a song. Then we have Exodus of chorus out of amphitheater in the same direction of files and ranks. Acting was therefore split between actors and chorus. Actors would only speak, recite, sing, whereas chorus, with a few exceptions, only sang. Then we've already discussed the role of kinesics. These are bodily movements. Then one can infer that gestures of many kinds must have been employed as revealed by a close reading of some plays, from liberation barriers, suppliant women, Electra, actions like wailing the head, beating the breast and the body vigorously, tearing the air, pulling, gnawing the face with fingernails and tearing garments. So this was all related to kinesics and it played a major role in communication. Then we have dance and theatre. We talked about the role of chorus. It came in a dancing way and you can refer to these. So like all other cultures in Greek too, art and form of dances might have been transmitted casually, informally. Now we have, the discussion about choreography. So it's not that we did not have choreographic schools in Greece, because these things, the oratory, dramatic performances, dialogues, and they not only formed an integral part of drama, but they were also related to public life, that of politicians in the Senate, and then you have military commanders and so on and so forth. I hope, learners, that you understood Aristotle's theory of tragedy, including the part first as well. In case if there are any issues with you, you can refer to the material given on the site, or else you are free to contact me via mail or telephonic conversation. Thank you.